The Vivobarefoot Motus Flex. So I have a lot of thoughts with this model. This is the latest Vivobarefoot shoe in the Motus line. So essentially we have the Motus Strength. That's more of like the cross-training lifting focused model. It's a little bit more rigid. And now we have the Motus Flex, which is designed to be very flexible and very minimalist feeling and very lightweight. So 5 first impressions that I have with this shoe is number 1, if you're looking at this model for training, there is going to be a limited scope in which they are going to perform best and where they'll start to fall short. It's funny because before I even looked at the formal product page, when I started training in this shoe, I thought to myself, okay, this will be a really good shoe for some strength stuff, but also mostly like body weight and like animal flow and kind of mobility focused training. And that's exactly where this shoe is kind of being marketed to, because with this model, you have a very stretchy upper made of mesh and knit. Now, on the foot, this feels really good. There's no toe creasing in this model, which I like, and also it's very comfortable and breathable. However, when you're training, you will have spillover if you're doing lateral work, and it doesn't give you the most upper security. So with this upper, when it comes to training, there's gonna be a little bit of a give and take there. And so if you are very much more mobility focused, and you're somebody who does like a lot of animal flow and you train outdoors, this would be a really good shoe for that context. The second first impression that I have with this shoe is the outsole construction. So with this model, you have a 1.5 millimeter thick lug depth, and then you also have a 2.5 millimeter sole thickness. So this shoe has a very low stack height, but with the sole construction, as you can see, there are breaks in it. So unlike the traditional Vivobarefoot Motus Strength or the Vivobarefoot Primus Lite III, knit, etc., this shoe has a little bit more give, which those models have that formal full rubber outsole, or sole for that matter. And so this model feels a lot more like a Wildling shoe, which has those breaks as well. It gives you a ton of flexibility, and you can pretty much feel everything under the foot in this model. So even when stepping on like tiny pebbles outside, I was picking up on that in this shoe, especially if it was in between these creases here. So if you are brand new to barefoot shoes, that would definitely be something to consider. You might want to look into a model with a slightly thicker sole that's going to give you a longer runway for that transition period. But for my uber purists out there who want as much flexibility and minimalist feel as possible, this shoe I think will be really good for your needs. Now my third first impression, and this kind of piggybacks off the sole of this shoe, is I'm curious how the long-term durability is going to fare with this model when it comes to taking these outdoors for longer days in inclement weather. And so why I say that is because with the Wildling models, an issue you can run into is because the soles in those models have the cracks, if you don't weatherproof those shoes, they can run into issues at a faster rate compared to a full rubber sole. So with this model, I just think we need more data points before we can draw conclusions, but I would say if you're gonna buy this model, you might wanna be a little bit more conscious of that, because this model will have a higher retail price. And if you're wearing them out and about in wetness and mud, that's gonna be really easy to get into this mesh and knit right here because it's so close to the ground. And then also with the material here, I'm curious how it's gonna fare long term and if there's gonna be any lipping with a lot of high volume concrete use. And if you're putting them in water, for example, letting that water kind of sit on the sole and then the shoe, if that's gonna cause issues long term. That's one of those things that we need more data points. We just need more folks to wear these models so we can kind of draw more conclusions, but it's definitely something that is on the top of my brain that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. And I'm trying to also just limit with how much I'm wearing this shoe when it comes to wetness and whatnot, because I don't want these to break down super fast. My fourth first impression with this shoe is the sizing. So this model fits very similar to the Vivobarefoot Motus Strength. If you're not familiar with that model, that shoe fits a little bit more true to size compared to the Primus line. The Primus line I often find runs long, so I typically recommend folks sizing down, especially if they already have room at the end of their toe box, but this model I think fits a lot more true. I do have a little bit of room, probably about a thumb's width of length at the end of my toe box, but it's not so much to where I feel like I'm totally swimming and sliding around in this shoe. I find that the upper security is fine enough for my needs, and with this drawstring here, I like that you can hook it down here. It's kind of a nice fix to some of the other models from Vivobarefoot that don't have this, that you kind of have to like tuck in awkwardly. So I do like this feature, and it does make it a little bit easier to kind of like cinch this tight and then lock this down here, and then so that way it doesn't get in the way when you are wearing this and having this kind of drawstring flop it up out and about. But sizing wise, true to size should be the call for most folks. And I think because it does have this stretchier mesh and knit upper, I think this model will feel wider compared to the Motus Strength, for example. That model has that more aggressive rubber toe cap. It has that more rigid upper construction, so it does lock your foot down, but it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room then for wider feet that kind of do need to spill over or need more upper volume to kind of feel like there's more width and more space in their shoe. So I think that will be a nice counterpoint for sizing for my folks with very high-end steps, thicker feet, and very wide feet that often find that Vivobarefoot models tend to run a little bit too narrow for their specific foot anatomies. Now, if you do find traditionally that you have a ton of room at the end of your toe boxes in Vivobarefoot models, you might want to size down in this shoe, but all that said, I think for most folks, true to size should be a safe bet. However, if you do have additional questions on the sizing of this model, drop a comment down below. My first impression with this shoe is I like the booty style construction, but more specifically, how we have a more rigid boot in this shoe. Because with the Vivobarefoot Primus Lite Knit, for example, we don't really have the most rigid boot, so some folks find that they can kind of swim around in that boot and whatnot. And this model also has a softer knit construction and mesh construction at that, so this doesn't actually cut into your foot like the Primus Lite Knit as well, which has a similar booty style construction. So I feel like in the context of shoe security and just overall fit and feel, the upper and booty style construction in the shoe is a lot better. This TPU layer back here and this rubber overlay on the back kind of gives you additional lockdown feel. You also have a cupping back here with the sole, but then also this material is softer, so you don't get as much friction pointing into the top of the ankle, top of the foot, which I had in the Primus Lite Knit and others have expressed on my review as well. And again, with this model, you don't have aggressive toe break. Because this knit mesh upper wraps the entirety of this forefoot, there shouldn't be any issues with this material kind of causing creasing and pressing into the top of the foot like some of the other models, aka the Primus Lite Knit. And I know I'm bashing that shoe, but there are just subtle construction things that I think could be improved in that model. But then also the Motus Strength could have that issue sometimes for folks too. I don't think you're gonna have that issue in this model. It's been pretty comfortable thus far. Now, when it comes to price of the shoe, I believe they're gonna be priced around $200. So it is not the most cost-efficient barefoot shoe. If you need a shoe for less and you need it for training and more mobility and just outdoor style work, and you like a more lightweight and breathable shoe, there are options out there that you can find for far less. So definitely don't break your bank for this model, because while I like it for certain things, I don't think it's gonna be that barefoot shoe that's gonna transcend everything, that's gonna be worth it for every single use case and every single person. So definitely keep that in mind. And if you do decide to cop this shoe, I have a code for Vivobarefoot. It's gonna be linked down below, but obviously make sure this shoe fits the context of your needs and don't feel like you need to go break your bank to buy this shoe. Sizing, once again, true to size should be the call for most folks. If you have narrow feet and you find that you're typically really swimming around in your shoes and your Vivobarefoot shoes, size down, and that's probably a safe call for your needs. But now let's dive into the construction specs of the shoe, because this model has a little bit more of a proprietary construction regarding the materials used. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the Vivobarefoot Motus Flex. So up here on the toe box, the sole wraps up and over, so you do get a little bit of additional security here when you're training. There's also a break here, so as you can see, let's go ahead and break down the sole right now. You see some breaks here up in the forefoot, and then through the midfoot here where this green layer is, there's a break there. And then right here at the midfoot on the lateral side, there's also a couple breaks here in the material, so there is a lot of flexibility in this shoe compared to other models. Again, it's similar to like that Wildling construction where they have breaks in their shoes and there's a ton of flexibility throughout. Looking at the upper in this model, you have a blend of a mesh and knit upper. There is a lot of stretch to this shoe. So as you can see, like there's a lot of give to it. And the forefoot up here has good breathability. I've been rocking these with socks and without socks, and they've been comfortable in both contexts. So if you're like myself and you like to be a little bit gross and go sockless in your shoes, as commenters often say on my videos, this model will be a really good bet because it feels super comfortable on the foot and it feels very sock-like, which I think is going to be a draw for some folks who really enjoyed that feeling in their shoes as well. You have a booty style construction. You have a nice stretchy knit here. It's a lot softer than the Primus Lite Knit, which is a model I like. You have a rubber overlay and TPU layer back here to help give the boot additional security. And then you have a drawstring with a toggle here to help lock this down. So there's a little hook here on this drawstring to help lock this down, and you could hang this on the drawstring right there, and it keeps that secure and from flopping around while you're training. You also have an insole in this model, so you have that removable insole, that Ortholite insole that's used in a lot of Vivobarefoot models, and the internal construction is finished. If you have additional questions on the shoe's construction, drop a comment down below. All right, guys, that was my first impressions of the Vivobarefoot Motus Flex. This is an interesting barefoot shoe. I don't think it's gonna be a shoe that everybody needs to go and invest in. However, if you are that purist that wants maximal flexibility and maximal comfort, and you want that shoe for outdoor training and even some summer wear, and you like to wear your shoes with both socks and sockless like myself, that's where the shoe can excel. However, once again, before you invest, I would highly suggest dropping a comment down below and asking if they're right for your needs if you're not completely sure. But all that said, y'all, I'll see you guys in the next one. A full review will come in the future. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.